is really wonderful to see everyone here. I want to thank each and every one of you, whether you're a panelist or an attendee or family, for being here on this very important occasion to acknowledge the life and wonderfulness of Gwen Araujo. Gwen's fearless mom is doing a brief interview outside, and then will be joining us here with her other family that's here. I want to take an opportunity just to say we wouldn't be here without the San Francisco Public Library, and I just want to say how much it means to me as someone who worked for 25 years in city government. And we always say representation matters, and so I want to acknowledge the fact that we have a wonderful gay man who is our city librarian, and so I just want to bring him up in a moment and say thank you, but I would like to also acknowledge some of the members of his team. And so first off, I'd like to acknowledge Christina Mitra and Kevin Darling, and if they could raise hands. Christina and Kevin are part of the Hormel Center, named for Jim Hormel, who was the first gay man ever to be confirmed as an ambassador. He was the ambassador to Luxembourg during the Clinton administration. And so it's really wonderful. And if you have the opportunity, please go and visit it. Then I would like to, in a bow to royalty, acknowledge that another member of the library staff, Marciel Gamino, is also here, who is the queen of meeting rooms. So I just want to say, God save the queen. So, and I really want to thank both Christina and Marciel for all of their help. And then lastly, I want to acknowledge the great team from Media Services that is here. Sam Genovese is here, and Hector Escaraman and Michael Smith. And I want to thank them for making it possible for us to record this. And I know from the youth that I know that YouTube is a really important lifeline. And so I'm really grateful that this gathering, while we are small and mighty, will go out to hopefully generations and thousands of young individuals who are looking for affirmation and hope in their lives. And so with that, I would like to take a moment and bring up our city librarian, Michael Lambert.
Thank you, Bevan. And it is an honor to be here with all of you today in community. Thank you so much to the Araujo family for giving us this opportunity to share this space and honor Gwen's memory. I want to thank Bevan for giving me a call and just asking that we participate and have this opportunity to convene the community. The San Francisco Public Library, this facility, it was constructed in the 90s, and there was a very expensive capital campaign to fund the construction of this building, and it stalled. And it was actually the LGBTQIA community that stepped forward and spearheaded a campaign to name certain centers, our affinity centers. And Ambassador Hormel, the late ambassador, he was the first one that stepped up. And as a result, we're the first urban library in the country, and still maybe the only major urban library in the country that has a dedicated LGBTQIA center with collections and archives and dedicated librarians and programming and services. So I just want to acknowledge the community. Thank you so much for being here today.
And I do want to acknowledge and thank the Bob Ross Foundation, and Bob was the founder of the Bay Area Reporter. And I want to say, parenthetically, that the Bay Area Reporter and the BAR were extremely important to the arc of justice for Gwen at a time when a lot of mainstream papers didn't know how to cover someone who was trans, didn't know how to show respect. The BAR was a beacon and was relentless in the reporting that it did about this trial to ensure, even with 2 trials, that justice was done. And so I want to thank the BAR, and we're so fortunate that we have Cynthia Laird, the news editor of the BAR, who's going to be the moderator for our first panel. Take it away.
Thanks everyone for being here. I don't know if you can hear me. Can everyone hear me? Is that better? I think that's better. Okay. So thank you very much. We have a great panel. We have on to my far left is Kris Hayashi, the Executive Director of the Transgender Law Center. And next to him is Jennifer Altman, a partner at Pillsbury Madison in Miami. And hear a little bit later some of the cases she's worked on for LGBTQ rights. And so I guess we'll start. We talked a little bit last week on a Zoom call in preparation for this panel. And I kind of wanted to put Gwen's murder in context. 2 decades later, trans people, especially trans women of color, are still being killed at a horrific rate. And I kind of wondered what each of you see as some of the reasons for that, 20 years after Gwen's death.
Yeah, so I want to start out by saying that I remember when Gwen was murdered. I was in New York City at the time, and I remember hearing about, sorry, is that better? I remember hearing about her murder all the way across the country. And I was thinking about that because I think it speaks to the power of the organizing of the community here in the Bay and the love of her family. And because at that time, that was rare, right? It was rare that we would hear when one of our family members, when one of our community members was killed. So I just wanted to name that because I think it's important to say. And yes, I mean, today the reality is that particularly trans women of color, particularly Black trans women and femmes, continue to be murdered across the country. And that every year, for the last couple of years, we've seen the most reported murders of trans people in this country. And it's just what we hear, right? It's the most reported murders. And we also know that too often, I mean, thankfully here in the Bay, we have newspapers like The Bar, but more often than not, even in folks' death, people are being misgendered, not being referred to by their name. So why do I think that this is happening? Why do I think that I don't know if we can say that there are more murders happening now than before, because I just think before we didn't hear about them. But there are murders happening, and there are too many murders happening, and we can't separate that from the broader context of what's happening here in the US and across the globe in terms of just a real escalation of hate and intolerance and violence that's really rooted in historic and ongoing systems of oppression and transphobia and racism and anti-Blackness. So I would say my big picture answer to that question is I think that as a world, as a community, we clearly have not addressed the historic and systemic ways in which white supremacy and transphobia and misogyny continue to grow and are perpetuated. That said, I will also say that the type of organizing and the type of community response that happened when Gwen was murdered at that time, that has just amplified, right? In that now, and it just continues to grow, that our community responds in such powerful and beautiful ways whenever we lose someone. And we've seen that here in San Francisco with amazing groups like Ella and The Mission, the Transgender, Gender Variant Intersex Justice Project, the Transgender Cultural District right down the street from here, the ways in which we, as we always have done, but I think now there's a way with social media, there's a way with the way in which our representation more broadly in terms of like TV, books, movies, things like that has grown, that we're able to more visibly honor and name when our community members are lost and murdered. And I do think it's very much in the spirit of what community did here, what family did here when Gwen was murdered. And I think it's very much in the spirit of what our communities have always done for each other, but it's just now more visible.
So I'm not, I should correct, my firm name's actually Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, so I got to get in that plug for
sorry.
the actual firm name. It was Pillsbury Madison 150 years ago, and it did start here in California, so people still remember it as Pillsbury Madison. I guess I would say, first of all, it's heartbreaking as a mother myself, and my heart breaks for Gwen's mother. To have endured this kind of not just heartbreak, but unfortunately the level of shame that people perpetuate on people that make the choices that are right for them. And I think I would say, as just a cisgender person who has been brought into the community first by the first transgender case that my firm tried pro bono in Northern Florida, and now another one that we're involved in that I think we'll talk about later. I would like to see, I fully respect and appreciate how much is done from within the community, but I think it's time for people that, I say outside the community, but I don't mean outside, because we're really all one community. And I think it would be, in order to move the dial, we really need to see other people step up and make it a human issue, not a political issue. And it's become very politicized in the past few years, more so than it was maybe 8 years ago. It's become, we're kind of regressing in the wrong direction. So I guess if I could say anything to folks that maybe are not as knowledgeable, is become knowledgeable, talk to people, become aware, talk to people that maybe you think you have nothing in common with, and you learn that really at the end of the day, we're all the same. We all have the same love of our friends and our family and the need for community, but the community really should be everyone. So I think I would like to see it, go back, maybe back a president or so.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the criminal justice system and whether you each think it's improved in the way it handles trans killings. One of the things that came up during the trials in Gwen's case, particularly the first trial, was that she was dead named by the defense and the prosecutors who were supposed to be going after these guys. So I know Kris is a little more familiar with work in California. Have you seen attorneys getting more training or becoming more, aware of what they need to do when they encounter these trans murder cases?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's yes and no, right? In that I do think that there's been some progress. And I will say that it is still very true that the way that Gwen was dead named then still happens today, unfortunately, way too often. And so while I do think there's some progress, while I do think that there's trainings that organizations do, I think that there's still a lot more that needs to be done. And I will also say, and this is more about kind of the broader prison system here in California, I do have to name that California has been one of the states that has made some of the most progress and had some of the largest wins when it comes to particularly the conditions that transgender people who are incarcerated face. I know this is a little different than your question, but I think it's all connected as it's about the prison system here. And for many, many years, trans leaders here in California, particularly to name the Transgender Intersex Justice Project, the Trans Latina Coalition, along with TLC, had been pushing for legislation that would protect transgender people who are incarcerated who face high rates of violence, like violence, sexual assault, discrimination, and were able to win and finally get passed a bill that allowed transgender folks who are incarcerated to decide for themselves where they would be housed. This is huge. This is huge. It is historic. It is a model for other states. And what I think is important to name is that anti-trans groups are suing the state of California against that bill. So and I think we'll talk about the anti-trans legislation happening around the country, while we often more hear about those types of attacks outside of California, that they're happening here as well, right? And there is so much more to do here in California to continue to defend our rights and lives.
Although I don't speak about California, I can tell you in my fair state of Florida, which I think has gotten a lot of publicity lately for our governor, I can tell you most recently when there were significant Black Lives Matter protests that 4 transgender individuals were arrested for protesting, one of whom was required to not be put with the female population, who was stripped of her wig and female-related clothing. And again, we're talking about for peaceful protests. They were out beyond the curfew. It was not violent protesting. There was no violence involved. Another was forcibly strip searched. So, I'm glad California is doing something about it. These were in violation of the Miami-Dade, its own rules. And so as much as maybe some states are moving in the right direction, others perhaps are not.
All right. Jennifer, let's talk about the current case you're working on in Florida challenging the state's anti-trans healthcare rule.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I had done another case that we prevailed. It was a bathroom case, the first bathroom case to go to trial. And we tried that case with Lambda Legal and were successful at the trial level. And it's Adams versus St. Johns County. As a result of developing that, and that was really my first foray in being exposed in any deep way about having a greater understanding of the science of it all. Really, it was more of a superficial, some people are transgender, some people aren't. I grew up in I would say, very liberal home in terms of acceptance and tolerance. But I didn't have much real understanding of any of the science behind it. So that was my first exposure to really getting greater knowledge. But as a result of that case, I was asked to work on the most recent case, where ACA, which is the Agency of Healthcare Administration, has passed a rule that went into effect on August 21st, which has banned all gender-affirming care for those on Medicaid who are transgender in the state of Florida. And what that means, by example, is the same care that someone else can get, meaning estradiol or testosterone, something that is very common, used every day, is now prevented for anyone who is transgender, as well as any other surgical procedures or any other care. And we have filed a lawsuit that was filed at the beginning of September. And the temporary injunction hearing is actually next week on October 12th.
Kris, Transgender Law Center is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. You have your big virtual event coming up next week. It started actually the year that Gwen was killed. I just kind of wanted to see what kind of changes you've seen over the years in terms of what your organization's been doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so much. So at the time, TLC was an organization just based here in California. Did work statewide, was very focused on legal information and resources, but at the time, there was so much less research, there was so much less resources for trans organizations. And so, I know some of what TLC did at the time was to even just collect that data on what our community needs were. And so fast forward 20 years, we are now a national organization. We have an office here in California still, but we also have an office in New York City, and then we have staff throughout the South and the Midwest. Our work as an organization is very much rooted in the legal expertise that we still hold, but it's also really about moving forward community-driven solutions that are really ultimately about keeping our community alive and thriving and fighting, continuing to fight for our rights in our communities and our liberation. We also are firmly a racial justice organization. Our work very much prioritizes communities within the trans community who are facing some of the greatest barriers. So that includes Black, Indigenous, and people of color, migrants, people living with HIV, people living with disabilities, as well as youth and elders, and specifically Black trans women and femmes. So we have been able to take some of the work that TLC started here in California and really take the resources we've been able to gain and try to use them to support folks across the country, particularly in the face of the types of attacks that we're seeing. And just to name, we started to see these anti-trans legislative attacks probably a decade ago, including here in California. There was an attempt to put an anti-trans ballot initiative here in California in 14, 15, around then. So this has been going on for a very, very long time, but we have seen a real escalation this year in the types of attacks we're seeing, in the types of bills that are trying to be passed. Like when Texas Attorney General declared that providing gender-affirming care to a minor is child abuse, that was an absolute escalation and attack. And days later, investigators were literally showing up at the homes of families who support their children. So we are seeing that happening across the country. We know it will escalate. So our work over the years has really expanded to say, as a national organization, as the largest trans-led national organization, how can we use our resources to support folks on the ground who are at the forefront of these fights, and particularly from communities who are facing some of the greatest barriers, and also are the communities who have the solutions that we need to really fight for our lives and the liberation of our communities. The last thing that I'll just go for it.
To that real quick.
Yeah.
One thing that people don't realize that is a byproduct of what you're talking about, and a byproduct of the law, the rule that was just passed in Florida. Johns Hopkins Gender Clinic is now shut down in Florida. The University of Miami currently has only one doctor that's now providing gender care, and that's probably soon to stop. So doctors are afraid to provide this care because for fear that they're going to be, because in Florida, the Board of Medicine is currently looking at a rule that's going to implement the ACA rule. And so what you're slowly seeing is not just the rule being passed, but you're going to see systematically the ability to receive care eliminated. And so it's not just, they passed a rule, maybe you can go to another state, but state by state, you're going to see doctors refusing to provide care, not because that's what they want to do, but because they're afraid of losing their medical license. And so it really is a ripple effect. It doesn't stop just with the rule. There are medical professionals currently throughout the state of Florida that will no longer provide gender-affirming care, even if they could under the rule, even if somebody is able to pay for the care. because they're terrified of the repercussions of losing their medical license. And I would also just add to that sort of separately, if you Google in Florida right now, and probably the same here, what clinics are offering gender affirming care, interestingly enough, Mr. Google, who I'm very friendly with, has decided to put those on the map so that they are seeing physical violence to their facilities, so that, you know, they are identifying on the maps where they are, so that people who are, I'll use air quotes, believers, are, you know, wreaking havoc and really scaring people about, in the same way that they did for abortions. Oh, wait a minute, we can't have those either now. You know, 40 years ago, right? So this is like, I guess, the issue du jour that they're trying to create the same kind of disruption with. So I just wanted to point out that there is a real ripple effect that we need to be very careful with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to be clear that the anti-trans legislative policy and narrative attacks that we're seeing across the country that are growing, that they are part of a very intentional and well-resourced strategy by the conservative right. This is not an accident. Like, they know that attacking trans people is a way for them to gain votes, is a way for them to stay in power, basically. And so, unfortunately, we likely will see this continue to escalate as the midterms approach in the next legislative session, which is why, you know, for TLC, our work has been really grounded in how do we do our best to support and flank trans leaders who are fighting back against all of these attacks, and just in really incredible, beautiful, and powerful ways. Like, even in Texas, that I started out talking about, the way that trans leaders organized, the way that community came together, parents and families of trans children, trans leaders, other allies in the community, to speak out and fight back against that policy was so powerful. There were rallies of hundreds of people. Community came together just to be with each other and to hold each other and to let each other know that they were not alone. The main trans organization in Texas, the Transgender Education Network of Texas, TENT, they were receiving calls round the clock from families and trans young people who were just terrified about what this was going to mean for their lives. And they fought back. They spoke out at hearings. They did all they could to be clear about how unjust and devastating this attack was.
So kind of segueing from that, last week, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed SB 107, which basically makes California a sanctuary state for trans kids and their families who come here to escape the draconian laws in their home states like Texas. It goes into effect January 1st, and it means that officials here will refuse to participate in any legal action the family's home states may take against them. I'm wondering, do each of you think that will help in terms of giving trans kids and their families some options?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as people here in California, I think we have a real responsibility right now to do all the things, do all the things we can think of to make California a sanctuary, a place where, because at this point, families of trans children and trans people themselves are already coming to California for healthcare. Like that already happens. So how do we, one, make it easier for people to do, and then two, make sure that there are things in place so folks are not criminalized if they do so. Because the other thing that we know and that we hear from local leaders throughout the South and the Midwest, where these bills are at their highest, is folks are like very clear. Like, some people will choose to leave, right? And that is something that is just a reality. And there are a lot of people who want to stay, right? These are folks' homes. This is where they live. Like, folks want to be there. And so I think for California to do all we can to still, though, support people to get the care they need.
I hate to be the glass of cold water on this, but, you know, there's a little something called the rule of law. And I don't know for each jurisdiction what the extradition laws are with regard to whether you committed a crime in a particular state and whether or not California would be required to send someone back based on the extradition laws. So I respect the governor's attempt to try and normalize and equalize people. Unfortunately, that may not be enough. I haven't researched the issue, but I suggest that it should be researched, because that may not be enough to protect people. But I think there's really just a much broader question, and that is, why should somebody have to pick up from their home where they might have a good job, or they might have family or friends or a church that they're a part of, and pick up and move to another state to get medically necessary care, or to be treated with the same level of humanity that my two children get to experience each and every day of their life. And so I think we have, like, as much as I respect what your governor, as opposed to mine, has decided to spend his time doing, the reality is we shouldn't be having this conversation, right? I mean, it shouldn't be a choice of, I'm going to be able to keep my really great job, or by example, have to appear under a pseudonym, because if the person was outed, for example, in our case in Florida, that may be a problem, because they can basically reverse engineer who the transgender individual is. And I think, we really need, and I go back to what I said before, which is, I think we really need, as a society, not to be speaking in terms of us versus them. And we need more of the us's or more of the thems, I'm not sure which, but to be speaking out on these very important issues. They're not religious issues, they're not political issues, they're human issues. And I think unless you get the folks that have the R by their name in terms of people in office, and not just the D's, and unless you get the people who are on the religious right, or at least have Catholic beliefs, coming forward to say, wait, this is not an issue of Catholicism or Christ, and it's really an issue of treating everyone the way they deserve to be treated. I would say under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, since we do believe in the rule of law in this country. So there's that little thing called the rule of law.
All right. Jennifer, I wondered if you could talk for just a minute about the school systems in Florida and how they're dealing with the new laws there, like the Don't Say Gay law and other things. I know that you worked with Lambda Legal and stuff like that. Are they involved in any of these cases? So
not surprisingly, there's already a lawsuit over the Don't Say Gay. But I will say, from my experience trying the Adams versus St. Johns County, I was remarkably heartwarmed by the number of administrators in Dade, Broward, and in other counties in the state of Florida that are really attuned to these issues, and have put into place procedures and protocols that are very supportive of the transgender community, with a real recognition of the high potential suicide rate, with a real way in which to allow each individual, because it's very different for each person. There's not a one size fits all, right? One person may want to use the bathroom associated with their gender at birth. Somebody may want to use a different bathroom, and to not treat it like every person is the same. Every person doesn't necessarily have top surgery or bottom surgery, and some people want to use gender affirming care in terms of psychology, and some people want to use hormones. So, I think they've developed a system where they treat the individual and speak to the individual as opposed to a one size fits all. And I think that really shows a great amount of respect and appreciation for those individuals. I was actually most pleasantly surprised by a principal out of Kentucky who you may or may not have heard of, Dr. Aberly. And Dr. Aberly is out of central casting for, his father's a retired police officer, and he's just looks like central casting out out of a movie for like a Biff kind of guy from Back to the Future. Not someone that you would think would be a vocal advocate for the trans community. And I recommend everybody Google him. He's amazing and has been just a tremendous asset and was a great witness in our case. But it does show you that with conversation and with education and discussion and just having open dialogue, that people can change and develop and grow. And he would be the first person to tell you that when he was the principal of a high school in Kentucky and somebody came to him expressing that they were transgender, he didn't know anything about it. And he took it upon himself to learn and become knowledgeable. And I think that everyone really is capable of that if we give them the opportunity to do so with dignity.
And if I can just jump in quickly also, what I found so powerful about what happened in Florida too was just the incredible organizing by young people, by students. Like I just saw, I mean, just on the internet, but like these just amazing videos of young people like taking over the Capitol and leading rallies and protests. And that has really been true so many times when we've seen these types of attacks. I just think it's important to name that as well.
Yeah. Kris, I just wondered if you could talk for a couple minutes about the ways that families are being supportive of their trans and non-binary children and what you've kind of seen with that over the years. Have you seen more acceptance from families now than there used to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's actually hard to kind of answer that question and quantify it. I mean, I do feel like that through my work at TLC, we meet so many families of trans young people and children who are supportive, who love their kids and want all the best for them. And I will say, like, parents of trans children and youth are definitely some of the fiercest organizers and advocates out there. And in fact, like, I pretty much never say no if a parent of a trans child asks me to do something. So, you know, they're just incredibly powerful. And it just is still true that for so many trans young people, and I know there's a panel coming up, and I'm sure folks will speak to this, that having family who is accepting and loving is not always the case. And there are still so many trans young people, particularly trans young people of color, who end up without supportive families, you know, end up in foster care and on the streets. And so, you know, I think it's hard to quantify. So it's both that there are incredibly supportive families, and then there are families who are not, and trans young people who really struggle and need support as a result.
All right, thanks. I think we're kind of done, but we all wanted to close with paying tribute to Sylvia and her courage. And so, thank you.
I was up till 4 in the morning.
I just want to thank the panel. If we can give the panel and the moderator. Before you step off, we actually have State Senator Scott Wiener here, the author of S-107.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought it'd be great if you could bring some remarks, and then we'll change panels.
All right.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Bevan. First of all, it was an amazing panel, and thank you for, you know, sticking up for the kids. We this year really made a conscious decision in the legislature that as all these just horrific things were playing out in other states, and we know that our community has always been you know, a target, and but this year the politicization of particularly LGBTQ kids, I've just never seen anything like it before. I mean, it's always been there, but to have sort of powerful elected leaders be so explicit about it, and in a way they did us a favor by being so explicit about it, because it makes clear what it is. And we decided we needed to push hard in the other direction. And so we worked very hard. We pivoted quickly, particularly when Governor Abbott announced that they were going to start prosecuting parents. And then other states started jumping in, with Alabama, as you know, threatening to put parents in prison for 10 years for allowing their kids to get health care. And so we were able to pass SB 107. I want to thank Governor Newsom for signing it to create California as a state of refuge for trans kids and their families, so that if families feel unsafe in their state, they can come to California, and we're going to do everything in our power to protect them and not send them back, and not honor subpoenas, and just do everything we can to gum up what these other states are trying to do, because we're not going to enforce their laws. We also were able to put on Governor Newsom's desk, and he signed a bill to move in the other direction and to really make sure that our healthcare system is serving the needs of trans people and gender nonconforming and intersex people, by requiring doctors to get some training on how to interact with TGI patients, and also requiring health plans to have a section in their network directory where TGI individuals can easily find providers who specialize in gender affirming care, and don't have to call 30 or 40 different physicians to figure out who provides those services. So in California, we're committed to moving in that other direction, and also sending a very loud message to LGBTQ kids across the country, and particularly to trans kids, that yes, there are powerful and despicable elected officials who are attacking you and politicizing you and trying to score cheap political points on your back. But there are also powerful people who have your backs and love you and are going to stand with you. And just having that message for these kids across the country, I think, is very impactful. So thank you to everyone in this room and on the panel for all the work that you do. And I look forward to continuing to fight the fight. Thank you.
right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, but also, I just want to say thank you to Gwen and her mother and their entire family. It is, of course, unfortunate that she had to pass. However, I think that her passing has brought so much attention to an incredibly important issue, has brought so much justice to so many, and helped the movement progress forward in such a powerful way, and so that it was not in vain. So I hope that offers you some small comfort in this moment. The only thing that I really wanted to say is that too often in our community, we hear our voices silenced. Too often in our community, our lives end far too early. I was just having a conversation around, especially for trans women of color and Black trans women, the life expectancy is 35. And so for people like myself, we consider ourselves lucky that we are still alive and that we are able to do the work that we are continuing to do. And how much more rich and how much more beautiful and joyful would our world be if we had people like Gwen still alive today who could have been artists, performers, business owners, mayors, maybe even president, and we'll never know because their lives were ended far too early. So I think it's incumbent on all of us here today and this wonderful, amazing panel of so many of San Francisco's best and brightest leaders and community leaders from all over the Bay Area to live our lives fully, to fight hard, and to continue the legacy of our ancestors and those who have come before us, who have laid the groundwork, not just with their efforts, but also with their lives. So in honor of all of that, thank you so much for being here, for doing this panel. My deepest condolences and my deepest gratitude for the sacrifices that have been made on behalf of your family. And let's keep fighting, and let's keep winning. Thank you.
You're more than welcome to stick around, by the way, and so just a. Well, I understand that. As the Bay Area's first, actually, as California's first openly transgender elected official, I understand exactly what you mean by campaigning, but I'm looking forward to not being the only one. Yeah. And I'll support you. She will. Okay. We're introducing ourselves? Okay. First of all, for those of you who don't know, since I just sort of said something about myself, I'm Victoria Kolakowski. I'm a Superior Court judge in Alameda County, California. And I was actually the first openly transgender elected official in the state of California. It was very strange when Lisa Middleton was elected down in Palm Springs. They were referring to her as the first openly transgender non-judicial elected official, a term that nobody has probably ever said before or since. Anyway, so and we have a wonderful panel here, and I'm going to ask everybody just to introduce yourself very briefly. Then I want to start off, and I have something I wanted to say, and then but I would like everybody to at least just introduce yourself and who you are, and I know many of you represent groups, and so if you could just do that very briefly, and then I'll start us off by answering my first question. And where they're from. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Castro. I work for Trans Latina, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm so excited to stay here.
Thank you.
But where are you from?
I'm from.
What city?
Oh, I live in Sacramento. I'm from El Salvador.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm work here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Gia Loving. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm, as of last month, the new co-executive director at GSA Network over in the Bay Area. I mean, the East Bay. LOL, me being like that in the Bay Area. Originally from El Monte in SoCal, but I've been in the Bay Area. Yes, come on, El Monte. Come on, SoCal. But I've been in the Bay Area for about 6 years. I moved here for school, and then I've been organizing community since then. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alexis Jimenez, the housing manager for Our Trans Home, which is a housing program for trans people that are experiencing homelessness, houseless, instability, etc. I'm from Richmond, was born in San Francisco, raised around the Bay Area. It's nice to speak my truth and speak about what I do.
Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. My name is Lala-Chavez. I'm the executive director of Lyric, LGBTQ youth organization here in San Francisco. I live here in the Portola district, but I'm originally from San Diego, Tijuana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aubrey Davis. I work with the Transgender district here in San Francisco. I'm originally from Austin, Texas, but raised in Arizona, and just moved out here about 6 months ago, so freshly new.
And I probably should have led off with saying that I am the wife of the moderator of the previous panel, Cynthia Laird, who is my better half, and so, which makes me very fortunate. So this chair has been kept in the family, and we just swapped chairs here in the audience and out here. I want to talk, the question was asked about where we were from, and I originally grew up in New York City, although I lived when I was in high school, we moved to Staten Island, which is kind of semi suburban almost area in New York City. And I wanted to just tell something, because I wanted to ask with everybody to start up and talk about how Gwen's story, how it resonates with them. But I wanted to start off with talking about, and we'll go from there, but I want to talk about my experience and why Gwen has mattered so much, has touched me so much over the years, because Gwen was 17 when she died, and when she was murdered. And I know what it's like to be 17 and to be in the wrong skin. I came out to my family when I was 17. I came out to my friends. And I remember being back home for the summer from college. I brought some clothes with me, and I would get dressed up in my bedroom, all dressed up, all made up, and nowhere to go. And so I just sat there. So I know what it's like to be 17, all dressed up, and nowhere to go. So I decided one night that I would do something, go someplace. I needed to be out with other people. I had to leave my home. And so I snuck out, and I went to a bus stop in this nice, basically suburban area. And I just wanted to I know what it's like to be 17 and to want to be seen, to be young and alive and pretty. And a car pulled up, and a man rolled down the window and said, "Hey, do you need a ride?" And I said, "Don't worry, the bus will be here soon." And then his smile went away, and he yelled out, "He, she, get in the car." And I backed away. And I walked, and he drove, and I ran, and he pursued down a one-way street the wrong way, yelling at me the whole time. I looked in that car, and all I could see was darkness, death, rape. I didn't know what would come. And so I know what it's like to be 17 and to be scared, to be prey, to be trapped like a rabbit being chased by a dog. And I saw a way out. I ran and I ran. I took off my heels and I ran, crossed 8 lanes of interstate highway, late, dark at night, no cars, just one occasionally. I dodged them as I made it across the highway. And I got to the other side, and I caught my breath. I walked back to my home. I snuck upstairs, and I took off my clothes, and I cried. Because I know what it's like to be 17 and to survive. But not everybody survives. and not everybody, but I know, and so I knew that I couldn't live my life just hiding. I did come out to my family that summer, and I've tried to be myself and true and to do this work for all these years because I did survive, but Gwen didn't. And I know that that was my experience was so long ago, and I know that Gwen's was 20 years ago, but we have folks here in the community, and I want to know how her story resonates with people now, with you, and what your experience and what you see in the community. And so I'm going to ask if each of you would just tell me something about how Gwen's experience, what that means in 2022 here in the Bay Area. The Bay Area where this happened, for those who don't know, she was murdered here across the bay. I sit right now as a judge in the courthouse where her murderers were tried. And so we're not talking about some red state. We're not talking about going off to Florida. We're talking about the Bay Area. And so I want to hear what you have to say about how this story, what this means to you now and to the community. And whoever wants to go first. And don't be shy, because I know you're all really great. I know that once you get started, we're going to have a great conversation.
We're ready for it. I guess I'll start, Sister. Go ahead and start. So again, my name's Aubrey. This story really resonated with me because one, she was a Pisces just like me. She's February 24th. So I could already see that she was very optimistic, very out there, wanted to explore the world and just kind of just be herself. In high school, I was honestly accepted as who I was. I started my full transition the year after high school. And during high school, I was always that flamboyant boy at the time, of course. And I was always wearing dresses. I was on the cheer squad, the dance squad. I knew all the popular people, of course, but you know. And I would get invited to parties too. And, you know, I would be scared to just go to these parties just dressed up in short shorts and crop tops and stuff. So that really resonated with me, seeing her, of course, doing all that, but also just because, you know, we've all been down that route where we've been part of a clique or a group and you wanted to go out with them and, you know, you go out with them and you want to present as yourself and you just get like that anxious feeling like, am I going to be okay? Are people going to take it okay and everything? And yeah, that's kind of how it started with me. Of course, throughout life, I've grown into myself and been able to just become myself and be who I am now today, which I am very proud of. But that's one of the areas that I would say that she resonated with me, just to begin, sorry.
I can go next. I'm Laura, they, them pronouns. I grew up in the Tijuana-San Diego border. I'm the youngest of 7 in a very Catholic, very conservative Spanish-speaking household. And although my family and my single mother was supportive in her own way, tried, and my family as well, I was extremely isolated and really lonely and just didn't feel like I could fit in. And so for most of my life, I was depressed. I had a ton of anxiety. I had a lot of depression. I was suicidal. I was just, you know, using substances because I didn't really quite know how to be authentically myself. As a 17-year-old, I started hanging out with a group of people, other queer people, and we, you know, growing up in the Tijuana side of Mexico was really dangerous. I mean, there are stories. I mean, I have stories of, you know, being harassed by police, holding my partner at the time's hand and fearing my life on a daily basis. One of my male friends, when he came out, his dad beat him up so bad that he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And so at that time, it wasn't safe for me to be authentically myself. So the first opportunity that I got, I focused on school. I got into school in San Francisco and I left. And it was here where I felt like I finally found my community, where I felt like I could be authentically myself, found my chosen family. And throughout that life, I've been trying to build that community with the youth that I serve at Lyric. And you know, it's interesting how so much time has passed, and we serve about 3,000 youth throughout the year who share that similar story of being neglected, not feeling like they can be authentically themselves, having a high percentage of mental health and substance abuse issues. And so what we're trying to create at Lyric is a place where young people can come, be unapologetically themselves, be authentically themselves, be affirmed for their name, their presence, and be celebrated, and offer a variety of services so that they can have the basic needs that they need in order for them to be productive members of whatever community they are. Now, I'm also a parent, and so I empathize. My heart breaks for you. I can't even imagine what you are going through, and just as a parent, I have a trans child, and so like it just resonated with me, your story as well, and so I'm just so appreciative of you advocating, not being silent, and continuing Gwen's legacy, because what you're doing is gonna be this ripple effect for generations to come. And so I hope we can make you proud. You are definitely making me proud as a parent.
My thoughts are like all over the place. There's so much that I would like to talk about. As a youth, I never had the opportunity to kind of fully express myself, kind of be gender fluid, be feminine, be, whatever I wanted to be, because, growing up in a hyper-masculine machismo family, in the Latin community, in Richmond specifically, and also spending some time in Fruitvale with my other family members, queerness or sexuality, just point blank, is not something that was really talked about in the early 2000s. Being gay was already kind of like, wow, that's extreme, And, I think it didn't change until I think 2010, 2012, and like more conversations about GLAAD and queer actors, actresses, and just became part of media and culture and Hollywood, etc. And not until did I get to kind of explore myself, be an adult, and move to college and move internationally, did I get to make those choices for myself and find community? Did I, and I'm glad Gwen had that, that environment. I was looking at the photos, the family photos, and I was really touched how she was unapologetically herself, safe in, your home, and with red hair, that's literally amazing. But the reality is also that there's outside of her home lies a lot of danger, a lot of people who want to do harm based on their ideologies, or don't know how to kind of navigate their feelings or attraction towards us. Because I feel like I have to navigate that as now, a very feminine, sometimes passing trans woman. I feel like sometimes I have to not be too close to my dating circles or dating potentials. I have to be really, really calculative and kind of be strategic on how I spend time with people that seek me romantically or attractively. Because the reality is that if I'm out with someone and they're see me as full woman, which is great, but then when it comes to intimacy or touch or whatever it is, they could be repulsed by our bodies, and even though, or be confused by the fact that they're attracted to us, but they don't know how to kind of deal with those feelings, and that sometimes leads to their masculinity being jeopardized, and they're like, oh my gosh, am I gay or am I queer? And then ultimately that comes to our bodies being jeopardized and put in a position of danger where I could get killed or I could get stabbed, or let's say we're at a restaurant and, things go well, and then afterwards I'm like not seeing daylight, And so I feel like Gwen shares a lot of stories that we have to kind of think about, and there's a lot of progress for sure, but still there's a lot of kind of, just patriarchy that trans women and trans people in general have to really, really think about and be strategic about, who we hang out with, etc. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing so much. I appreciate just the ability to be here and be part of the conversation. And it is it is always wild to really see the parallels in our stories, because we don't want to say that being trans is one story. And also we all know how it feels to be 17 and want to be seen and then be seen for the first time, and then have to make that decision around is this worth the chase? Is this worth all the risk? And so I think backing up a little bit, thinking back to when I first, I first heard of Gwen's story when I first watched the documentary, the movie. And for myself, this was the first time that I had known about trans people or the possibility of not being a boy. And I think my mom had always tried to drop hints that whenever I was ready, she was down to be cool with me. And there weren't many trans movies to show your kid. So shit, she was a girl like me, it literally was show your kid this movie, right? So I was like, fuck. So there I was, 10, right, watching this movie. And, for me, of course, through it all, what I saw was a girl. What I saw was as cute of a girl as I saw when I watched the movie Gia, right? That was so transformational, made me change my name. Because I feel like what I saw was that, yeah, it is possible for someone to just follow their heart. And even in a cruel world, even with family support not being guaranteed, it might be the good path to follow our heart. And even when shit happens, at least she followed her heart, and that's what I learned about my first opportunities of maybe being trans, was that it was gonna be a complicated thing. Not many people were gonna be down for it. And it was dangerous, right? But it was possible. So I took that, and I think that was my only exposure to trans folks for my first maybe 15 years. Yeah, and then I think as I was able to explore myself and then finally find community in GSA clubs, which was I had heard about, again, GSA clubs existing in when I was 7, and I had known that okay, maybe one day I can get to a place where queers are meeting and not being hurt, right? So that was my destination. And when I got to high school and there wasn't one, I was just what the hell am I supposed to do? There are no queers here, and I was promised we have a meeting room where we meet, apparently. So I had to create that space, and around the country, so many kids are doing that, where we're just refusing to accept that our parents might be totally right. Maybe they're right on so many things, but not on what I feel inside, right? And my mom, at least, she fucked up a lot of times, but she also was down to learn, and even through her mess up, she was very committed to making sure that she knew that I loved her, or that she loves me. And I made sure that she knew that I loved her. So I think Gwen's story, I think your family's story, I think all of our family stories, wherever we are in the healing process, whether we are back with our parents, or whether we're on that way, or whether that's not going to be an option, I think the fact that our stories are so common, or there's so many similarities, is because we all start with an opportunity, right? We're all born, and there's an opportunity for someone to care for us, and that is such a decision point, right? Whether we have that care or not, opens doors completely for the rest of our lives, and I'm still recovering from so many closed doors for myself. And now also as a parent of a trans kid, I don't know why God gave me the trans kid. I was like, what? This is wonderful. And so confusing. How do I raise a trans person who I want to give them everything, to be everything is possible. And I know that I can't lie about the fact that everything is possible with so much danger. That is undeserved for you, a 4th grader. You should not be having to think about this. Right, but I know that Sylvia and Marsha were thinking about this. I know Gwen had to be thinking about this. I know we're all thinking about this, right? As we decide how beautiful we're gonna get, because we're hot, like we're cute. And to dress ourselves, like the whole hour of getting ready is difficult, right? Even beyond the mascara, it's like, shit, like what's gonna happen, right? But yeah, so I don't know what's gonna happen, but I do know that these moments remind me that it's worth it. Like we're cute and we should just live that. And I think Gwen's story has always been that like North Star for myself. Thank you.
So, voy a hablar en español porque es
Gracias.
lengua materna y me puedo expresar mejor. Creo que para mí es muy interesante cómo como un poquito melancólica, cómo la historia de Gwen conecta mucho con mis amigas. Estoy aquí como una sobreviviente. Estos 4 años creo que he vivido en Estados Unidos y hace 4 años conocí la historia de Gwen por mi compañera Stephanie, porque llegué a ella y Gwen es parte de la historia que se comparte en ella. Aunque muchas personas tal vez vean mal recordar la memoria de alguna persona, pero muchas personas que hemos sobrevivido, a lo mejor seguimos luchando por todas nuestras hermanas y comunidad que ya no está. Para mí, estas historias, estos momentos son significativos porque, no sé, tener la oportunidad de vivir, de compartir y de ver cómo tu amor sigue existiendo y creciendo y manteniéndose vivo es muy importante. Creo que la mayoría de personas trans latinoamericanas tenemos historias muy duras para sobrevivir. Y comenzando por la familia y todo, y es un proceso, ¿no? Un proceso muy grande, muy largo y... y estaba... cuando me invitaron a ser parte de aquí, estaba reviviendo mucho de mi vida. En el 2016 casi fui asesinada en El Salvador y ese fue el motivo por el que huí de mi vida, mi familia, mis amigos y llegar aquí y conectar con tantas personas, con historias maravillosas y estar sentada aquí, compartir con personas que hacen un gran trabajo en diferentes áreas, en diferentes lugares. Para mí significa mucho y a lo mejor no sé cómo expresarlo, cómo contarlo muchas veces y a veces el sentimiento y el trauma, que es algo con lo que trabajo diariamente, porque como persona trans tengo miedo, mucho miedo y no sé, a veces es difícil, muy, muy difícil estar aquí, compartir y tratar de luchar con tanto odio, con tanta transfobia, con tanto dolor que existe alrededor de la comunidad y no sé, eso me puse un poco melancólica y nada más, pues gracias a todos y todas por compartir, por honrar la memoria de Gwen, porque creo que significa mucho mantenerla viva, mantener vivo su recuerdo y siempre es muy duro recordar, y creo que cada persona tenemos una persona importante a la que tenemos que recordar. Y personalmente me siento muy identificada porque mi mejor amiga, mi mentora, la persona que cuando era adolescente me ayudó a salir del hoyo al que estaba cayendo, que fue una compañera trans, mi hermana, y que también lastimosamente le arrebataron su vida de la misma manera como sucedió con Gwen. Y significa mucho, mucho tomar la fuerza del dolor y poder sobrevivir. Duele, pero es necesario, y a veces muchas personas nos ven más allá de las apariencias, pero nunca las personas se sientan y te preguntan cómo estás, cómo te sientes. Y, y a veces hay que tener mucha empatía y unirnos como comunidad. Y a veces ese es el trabajo más difícil que existe entre nosotros y entre el mundo.
Oh,
That was a good question.
what?
I was gonna say we could try, but then we're probably out of time already.
But one thing I do want to say is it's my understanding that you can see by the fact that we have cameras here, this is being recorded. And I don't know whether or not we might be able to get some services for that later. Because we're. Because we want to make to keep this day as because we know how powerful everything that was said was. We wanted to make sure that we had this preserved, and so some of the organizations involved have said that they want to put things on their websites, and this is not just going to end now. But because of that, I wanted to say there's been some references to some things. I just want to just take a moment out and to say, you mentioned, for example, GSA. Could you explain for people, and people in the room, most of us are, insiders know this, but other people might not who might be interested. What do you mean by, what are GSAs?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So GSAs are clubs. It stands for different things. They used to be gay straight alliances, genders and sexualities alliances. It's just all the different formations of young kids who are getting together whenever they can, wherever they are, and talking, right? So we see that the first GSA was like in 1972. But also like STAR was created, and that was like a bunch of street kids who were hanging out, and that's like kind of like I consider it like a street GSA. Now the organization was created in 1998 to support GSA clubs and support high schools and middle schools who don't have them. But now we're seeing, although there's already been the arguments, in various cases, like in Utah, about whether we have the right to a GSA club. That's another thing that's being blocked, right, in the experience of young folks, is that GSAs are now being called into question, right? Can kids organize and be meeting on campus? Some schools have even, taken away all clubs as a way to say that, like, we're not going to allow anyone because we don't want the one queer club to be able to meet. So, for me, GSA is just like our work, but also for any young queer kid, like I mentioned, who like hears that there's a club that you can maybe join one day and get involved in, it becomes like just that one step you need, because when you're young and queer, young and trans, like all you need is one step because nothing's guaranteed. So for me, you're right. Like this is gonna live, and we need kids, we need young people to just like know that, like, for one, you are literally not alone. There are many beautiful people out here who are somehow making it, and also like organizations like GSA clubs or all the community orgs that we can like just get to. I think are so important to us actually surviving and eventually thriving.
And I heard reference to Lyric. Lyric provides, I think you mentioned a number of different services. Did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, Lyric, similar to GSAs, we have housing navigation for youth that are experiencing homelessness. We refer them to various community-based organizations for mental health. We have leadership opportunities, internships, support groups for various groups. We try to offer as many opportunities for young people to just gather. So we have an artistic resistance program for young people that want to express themselves in various artistic mediums. We have queer history groups so they can learn about our past and of our legacy and figure out a way for them to become activists and social justice warriors kind of moving forward. We have internships. I mean, you name it, we try to kind of create it. And I think more than anything, what I tell people, what Lyric is special is very similar to the GSAs. It's literally that container, that community where young people can come and see themselves, be unapologetic, find another peer that they can relate to. And, you know, for us, also finding elders in the room that can share similar lived experiences. That in itself makes a big difference. And we've seen research, I know the Trevor Project just came out with a study of like, it literally takes one adult to make a huge impact on the positive impact on the lives of trans and gender nonconforming youth. And so, yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask, Aubrey, what's a transgender district? Oh.
Yes, so the transgender district is on market for that part, but basically what we do is we just help empower trans people of color, all walks of life, but we try to create a place where people can either support themselves, build housing, build entrepreneur. So like right now we're working on an entrepreneur accelerator program where we put 8 to 10 people through a program, a 4-week program that gives them business classes, sets them up with a business coach, business assistant and everything, and basically help them start their full business. After that full program, the 4-week program, they get set up, hook up with a web designer, just the whole zhuzh of things to kind of just get their business kickstarted and, you know, start a small business. And then we're going to be having a graduation here in the next month, and we'll be giving them a $10,000 seed grant that will help them start their business so they can start all that. So we honestly are just here to kind of just help everybody just find themselves, really. We're just all about empowerment and all about equality and all about just helping the trans youth find themselves and everything.
Okay, did Alexis, did you want to say anything about what you do?
So I work for Our Trans Home. My coworker also Ariana's over there.
Yeah.
So we basically work through St. James Infirmary and get funding from St. James Infirmary to kind of provide transitional housing and rental subsidies for trans people across the Bay Area that kind of are struggling either to pay rent or, you know, need, you know, a place to call home while they're recovering or while they're transitioning. We have also the Navigation Center, the Tamambu Navigation Center that was kind of recently opened, I think it was this year, part of Our Trans Home, because the reality is that there's not a lot of like housing programs that are kind of designed or centered for trans clients and trans people who are experiencing homelessness. And, you know, sometimes those programs, if they're available, you know, they fill up quickly because there's a lot of people who are experiencing instability with housing. And, you know, Bay Area in general is very pricey. Having to, you know, afford gender affirming care is also very pricey. So there's a lot of financial barriers that trans people kind of have to kind of juggle. And so our program kind of is there as a sanctuary to kind of provide some relief for housing and also relief with, you know, paying part of people's rent or referring them to, you know, just a shelter where they can immediately find a bed so that they can't live in this, you know, or just sleep in the streets because it's very dangerous. It's for trans people to just be out there and to be vulnerable and to sleep at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. somewhere. You know, it just could be a life or death situation for some of us. So, you know, our trans program is there to support everyone, to support, you know, people in the Bay Area. You know, we're just there and we're just kind of working to make sure that the Bay Area in general is a livable place specifically for trans people.
By the way, the reason I don't snap my fingers is because I've never learned how to snap my fingers. I just don't know how to do it. For some reason, I move my fingers and I just don't know how.
It's like jazz, so you know, at the jazz
Yeah, so
club, you
that's
kind
why
of
I
do that.
clap or do, but I don't snap my fingers. So I just want to understand that that's not because I'm not trying. I'm snapping
Spear
inside.
fingers, yes. Sign language,
But Victoria, Ella para Trans Latinas.
Yes, we have a different programs for the Trans Latina community. So the best situation with Ella is the services in Spanish. The only organization speaks Spanish. So the all staff speak Spanish and somebody speak English. Yeah, and we have a different workshop for prevention, HIV prevention, and yeah, different workshops. So kids management, yeah, food before the COVID. So now it's different. We have a program for the COVID-19 relief visa. It's the every month we have maybe 90 visa COVID for $175 every month for the Trans Latina community. And yeah, and Stephanie Galante is the she worked for the Luchadoras program. It's the Empower program for the Trans Latina. It's the for professional and personal situation. And yeah, she's amazing leadership and great co-worker. And yes, and different programs. Yes, thank you.
Great. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about these things because there are so many resources that are available now that may not have been available before. And I think that's very important for people to know how to reach out, to find other people, to know that they're not alone. Because when I was growing up, we had no information. We didn't have an internet. We didn't know about anything. And so now there's so much more information available and there's so many services available. But even so, I just want to go back to just remind, I don't want to be rain on the parade, but one of the things that was pointed out earlier is we have all these opportunities now, and it's wonderful for us to be ourselves out and proud as trans, but there is still danger in it, isn't there? Mm-hmm. And so that we're not, that this isn't just 20 years ago, this isn't just how many years ago for me, but we still live in a world that's scary for trans people. I don't want us to leave on a down note. And so what I want to know is we're going to be wrapping up in a few moments. What message would you want to give at this point? As your final statement here, as you're going out, about what we should be thinking about as the audience. Anybody might see this later, and anything that you want to say to Sylvia. And so, just feel free to jump in.
So I would like to just provide some hope, or what I think will happen generationally in the future. I was, before working at Our Trans Home, and actually during working there in the program, I was also working as a high school teacher for about 5 years, working in the school district in West Contra Costa County, and also some time in San Francisco Unified School District. And during my years as a high school teacher, I've noticed that, just youth in general are very, very comfortable with sexuality in general. There are so many educators right now that are so confident in themselves and, providing a great safe space and just kind of an educational context that youth now are just getting so comfortable with having a trans teacher like myself, I transitioned during my teacher years. Students were so accepting of me, which is amazing. I thought I was going to get some backlash or anything, but I didn't. I've seen students being openly gay, being openly pansexual, being openly bisexual, being openly lesbian, holding hands in the hallway. In the early 2000s, that was kind of an awkward thing to see at school. But now I see youth they're like, okay, we get it. We're gonna still do this. And so I feel like for trans youth especially, I feel like that's gonna just progress and get even better and better over the years, with trans visibility, trans activism, trans rights, just trans programs and just awareness in general. I feel like, pretty soon, I feel like maybe in 10 years, 15 years, or even sooner, I feel like trans students, trans healthcare will just kind of progress so much that it's like, you're gay, okay, what else? That's cool. The sky is blue, whatever. So yeah, as an educator, former teacher, I feel like there's definitely kind of generations to come that are going to be changing it up for all of us, and provide care for us eventually too. So there's hope.
Yeah, I kind of want to focus on that too. When you were talking, I was thinking of trans joy. And just empathy. For me, it's I just want to focus on the heart and every interaction that I have with other parents, with other youth. That's what I'm going to focus on. It is the empathy and compassion and the human side of things. Because, yeah, the life is really hard and is really brutal, but I also think there's some really great progress. And you're right. Our youth are literally going to change the world. You can see it. And so, I know you can see it. The young people are actually educating the older generations about empathy and compassion. And so when more people are coming out within their families, it is the 5-year-olds, the 7-year-olds are like, so what, and? My teacher is also who cares? And what, what am I gonna eat today? So it's so natural, and so that's kind of what I focus on. It's a beautiful thing.
Me?
Again, if you want, sure.
Well, for me, same with everything that they're saying, but I think just looking at it all, I want to say that you're not alone. That's a big thing too. I know there's a lot of people out there, especially in rural cities, there are trans kids out there that really don't have the connection that we may have here. Even coming from Arizona, I didn't think that this community would be so big, honestly. Coming from Arizona, I barely knew 1 or 2 trans people, and I got lucky that way just because I was working in one of the medical fields for it. But still, with that, you're not alone. I feel like just kids just kind of maybe need to educate themselves, reach out to people, talk to someone, talk to a therapist, talk to a close friend, anything, honestly. Anything to help you just feel a little bit secure in yourself, that would be a big point. But that's the biggest thing for me is just, yeah, we're all here. We all want to help.
Nada más para mí, hay que ser poderosos, libres y hermosos. Y y pues sí, no estamos solos.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. I think what I want to share, what I would like to leave off on, is that I feel so lucky to have learned from the trans folks around me, and also for myself, that really being trans is one of the most luckiest things. I think that I've learned very early on that that this was really just it was less about finding a word that described me, and more about how can I share the magic that I know exists in my body. And I really want to just thank every other person who also just offers that magic to the world, because I think trans people really will lead the way toward freedom, because we have had to do so much work in ourselves to even love ourselves and be down to walk out the door. So, if you are questioning or even thinking about what does it look like to not even like shit on my own gender. Like, what if I really enjoyed it? That's really one thing I'm excited for you. And if people are lucky enough to be in the lives of other trans people, like you are so lucky. And I hope that you are able to really appreciate that and honor that. And of course, if you think that you don't have any trans folks in your life, like we're out there, we're everywhere. So like, are you making it clear? Like my mama did for 14 years. And then I was like, okay, yes, I'm gay. Let's get it over with. But I think that's so special. So thank you for making sure that, Gwen knew as much as she knew that she was loved. And then thank you all for being here. Because we really all do deserve the glory and the love of this moment. So thank you.
I love that.
I just want to say for myself, my final words are about this. The greatest gift that I got from you, Sylvia, was not this lovely pin. And it, in some ways, and it wasn't even the opportunity to hold Gwen's remains, which has had a powerful effect on me all my life, because it makes it very, very real that, this isn't just a thing we talk about. But the thing that was the greatest gift that you've been able to bring to us is that you've shared the joy that Gwen was. Mm-hmm. And just while we're here talking about things that are sad in some ways, and we're remembering a very horrible day, the truth of the matter is that we had 17 years of light and joy and love that was cut too short. I have no doubt that Gwen would be amazing today with us. I can't even imagine what she could have or would have done. But I don't want us just to think of her as somebody because of what those young men did, but rather about who she was and her spirit and the transformation that she is experiencing and the love and joy that she had inside of her. And that's the part that it's so hard when we, in the trans community, we talk, we remember our dead. We do a lot of things to do that, and that's very important. And by the way, thank you, Gwen, behind for the remembering our dead and the Transgender Day of Remembrance. But our community is not about what they do to us. Our community is about the way that we shine for others, and so and Gwen was a perfect example of that. And so thank you for that. And so I believe and I want to say how honored I am to be on a panel of such amazing people tonight.
Now my turn. I was too anxious earlier. And I have all these things I want to say, and I have no time.
Take your time.
You have time.
I love my podium because now that I'm 58, it hides.
It's your throne.
People are depressed. It's Gwen used to always make jokes and at my benefit sometimes. Always. What? Oh, you guys can't hear me?
Yeah. The long ones.
Imelda, you hear that?
You see what happened was that
long
mic.
one.
Yeah.
Oh no. I come from a family of 14.
The state senator is kind of tall.
Yeah, he's way up there. Must be nice. See, she heard me. Well, I come from a family of 14, and I'm number 4, so the only way you got heard was to be loud, so I don't know how to whisper. So sometimes I really, honestly, and a lot of the speeches that I did, some places the mic wouldn't work, probably Gwen, but they could hear me. So this is a lot smaller, too. I do want to say something. There's so many things that popped up in my mind, and I started crying because I only would think my daughter could be on the panel. That's right. And not me sitting in the audience as a mom, right? Yeah, this kid was really, really smart, and I'm so lucky that she was my kid, and I had her for 17 years, and she had a great life. She really did. Very expensive kid, but she never wore dresses. Somebody brought you, I think you brought it up in the end. She never wore dresses. The only time she ever wore a skirt was the night that they killed her. And one of her friends had come over, and changed her clothes and left that miniskirt there. So that's what she was wearing. But she was never flamboyant. She, where's Beto? There's one of her good friends. Thank you for being here. And I actually should have started off by saying thank you for everyone that's here. I actually thought it would be fuller, but it's okay because everyone that's here it's important for you to be here. Who's I can't see, I don't have my glasses. Who's in the back? Dulce? Why don't you guys stand up, her friends? Please, quickly. These are her real friends. Beto, stand up. Don't be shy. Jess, stand up. And yeah, they've never been on camera or anything, but these are her real friends that knew her just like how I know her. Yeah. And she could be a headache, couldn't she? But she could be fun. Well, she was more of a headache for me because I'm the mom. We had an understanding. But yeah, she was 17, and it's just sad that she died the way she died because in her life, she suffered a lot. Not with the home, but outside of the house. And yes, you guys are right. It's still very dangerous for you to be out there, and it's not safe. And I promised her at her funeral that I would be her voice until people stop dying. And they're still dying. And it's in the manner that they're killed. It's not like they're shot in the head and they die instantly. My daughter was buried alive. And I had suppressed that fact for so many years, and I just realized it 3 years ago. And it tore me apart. She had dirt in her lungs, and when they had unearthed her from the grave, her hand was the first thing that was sticking up, and she was still hogtied, and that just breaks my heart. I mean, it's overkill, and a lot of these murders are overkill. And to me, there's no justice. All I've ever wanted to know was what happened to my daughter from the moment she walked into this house to her last breath. And as her mom, I'm entitled to know that. It doesn't matter how much time they gave these guys because it doesn't justify what they did to her. Not she, but what they did to her. And now after 20 years, and it's still going on, and people are still being murdered for who they are in a horrible, horrible manner. I started speaking up because I don't want another family or another mom to go through what I'm still going through. This is still fresh to me. I hate when people say, oh, time has healed or time will heal. It hasn't for me. I wish I could say that it has, but it hasn't. And so all we can do is continue to be a part of what needs to be done and get the work done. Because without you and this world would be even worse. So we can only I'm only one person, but everybody plays a part. All these organizations, everything, an intricate part in creating the change that needs to happen in this world to make everybody safe, not just the trans, but the LGBTQ. And I am so confused with all this binary and whatever, because to me, we're all human beings. I don't label you as trans, and I won't, maybe I'm old school, I don't know, but that's just me. We're all human beings in this room. I'm no different than you, you're no different than me. You deserve equality across the board with everything, school, church, and work, and home, everything. And I'm so sorry that you go through all of this because it's not right and it's not fair. This world needs love. Let's give love out to the world. And in this day of remembrance of my daughter, she had so much love. Yeah, she was mean in the end, but it's not who she really was. It was because after so many years of people looking at her funny, hitting her or making her feel uncomfortable, I watched it. And it's not right. What do you do as a mom? All I could do is get mad and, protect them and to scold the other parent, the parent of the child that wasn't correcting their child. That happens all the time. I can tell you this much. I know I probably went off track, but it's okay because this is a good point. I have 12 grandchildren, and I can tell you that none of my grandkids look at anybody funny. It's normal to them. So yes, we should, because you know what? It's possible to raise your children to be loving, good citizens in their communities. I'm very proud of my grandkids. And yes, I did that. Yeah. So it's possible. And Gwen, oops, sorry you guys, my dress. But Gwen sacrificed her life for a lot of the changes to happen. But still, here we are 20 years later, and I did not expect to be here. But I'm here because this is the city where she felt comfortable and loved. And this is where I felt comfortable and loved when all of this happened. So many people were there for me. A lot of fake people, but there is also a lot of good people and sincere people. And those are the people that are here that matter. So thank you to her friends. Gwen is so happy. I've been hearing no doubt everywhere I go. So that's proof. They killed her physical body, but her spirit lives on forever. And she's always with me. Every day I see a butterfly. And since the passing of her favorite tío, Uncle David, and her favorite tía Imelda, who's sitting in the front, who never missed a day in court through both trials and sacrificed their careers to be there for me and for Gwen, I love you for that. But now, since David's passing, there's two butterflies. He's the one tío that never had children, and he was like the father to, my kids were like his kids, my grandkids were like his grandkids, so. And then I took care of him before he passed, and so it's heartwarming to me to know that they're together. I'm a little jealous, but I'll get over it. So yes, in closing, I think I would say thank you everyone for coming here. Thank you to Bevan for helping me do this. I could never have done this without you, and Gwen would have been angry at me for I don't know how long. And that would really hurt me because then I wouldn't, we're better now. Our relationship is good. She's still around, trust me. I'm sure her friends could vouch for that too. And my sister. A lot of miracles that we witnessed and very privileged for that. But thank you very much. And my heart is so full right now. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. My mija says thank you, especially to you. But I want you to tell the story before we close about the day you were sworn in. But I'm gonna maybe get down off the stage. But thank you everybody for coming. I really, really appreciate it, especially you guys.
Well, I'm not sure. Let's see. What? Yes, I know. And so when I ran for election as a judge, and I ran first in 2008, and that's when I went and met with Sylvia, and when I got to and she gave me this pen, and she told me, said, the story behind these pins being worn at the trial, and of the young men who took Gwen's life. And she asked me if I would wear this, when I was elected. I said, well, I can't wear it on my robe because the rules say that it has to be a plain black unadorned robe. But I said, I promised I would wear it underneath the robe. And when I was sworn in, I wore it under my robe. On important days like that, I wear this because it reminds me of why we do this, and how important it is for us never to forget, and for us to stand for justice, and for us also never to forget the beauty. And all the things that I talked about earlier are sort of all represented to me in this, and I keep it safe. And it means so much to me that you shared this with me. And it means so much to me that you shared, in so many ways that you've shared Gwen with me. I wish I could have met her. I really do. But I think I have. And I thank you for actually bringing that up and making me part of this, because it means a lot to me, and I've been part of this journey actually with y'all from back. I don't know if people remember, we did memorial services back early on, and I appeared as a clergy person, as an MCC minister, and at I think was the 1 year anniversary, and it means a lot to me to stay part. When I heard that this was the 20th anniversary, I insisted that I be part of this. But this is hard. I think for those of us who've done this for a long time, like I said, so much grief and so much of this other stuff. But the truth of the matter is that what we need to focus on and what we focused on today is on the joy and the light and the way that we're moving forward. And so thank you.